Thank you again for joining our web tips this morning. As usual, everyone is on mute. If you have any questions, you can either raise your hand or type your question in the chat window. You can ask during the presentation, or you can save them for the question section at the end. Gary, you can go ahead and get started.
Alrighty, well, welcome everybody. I'm not exactly sure who's on the line today, but what we're going to cover is some of the new features and improvements that went into Composer version 11, 11.1 and 11.2. Hopefully for those of you who've used Composer in the past, you'll learn something new. And for those of you who have not used Composer, hopefully it'll give you a little idea of what Composer is all about and what it can do for you. So a little bit about myself. Let's see, get this moving. There it goes. A little bit about myself. I'm a software engineer and now a solution architect. I've been working with forms and workflow for about 15 years now with several different companies. I was a Winshuttle employee for 4 years and was hired with a couple other individuals to actually develop the Composer product. And then now I'm with CPS as a solution architect and actually using the product to implement process improvements and implementing SAP, etc. So enough about myself. Get into kind of the meat of this. Again, we're going to talk about Composer 11. And the way I've organized it is I'll do a quick overview of some of these key features. This page here is some of the ones that I'll go into a little bit more detail about, and then the next page is will show you where you find it in the application, and then we'll do a little demo and kind of give you a real-time look at how this stuff was implemented and how it works. So to begin with, there's a concept of shared data connections now. So when you do create a solution, majority of the solutions have some type of data connection or interaction with some type of database or SharePoint list. And now what you can do is you can store these on the server and you can share them amongst different solutions. And I'll show you a little bit more about that. A lot of processing feedback has been added to the product. A lot of times when things take a long time to query or to run web services or process tables, etc., you're really not sure what's going on. So we try to add a bunch of new feedback to the product so you're a little bit of better user experience. There's a new graphical user interface to build conditions when you're building rules. Before it was more just you had to type in the condition. Now it's allows you to do group conditions, ands and ors, etc. Concept of field instructions. So on any field you can now put, it's like a tooltip, but it's a nicer tooltip where you can put in full rich text as part of that tooltip, make it look a little bit more professional. The rules inspector is something that I'm not sure a lot of you have used, but what that does is allows you to kind of interrogate the different rules that are currently implemented within your solution. A couple of new options there. You can now export it and you can search through all of the different rules. Makes it a little easier to help find things. Something that was asked for quite some time was groups within groups, and these are not repeating groups, so they're just subgroups, and they act just like any other group. And again, I'll go through all of these in a little bit more detail. I'm just kind of flying through these right now just to give you an overview of what we're going to be covering. A couple of new rule options and actions I'll go over. When importing scripts into your solution, a lot of times it's very difficult to update an existing script. So now that's kind of taken care of for you, where you can just select your script, set update, re-import the new one, and it'll remember all the field mappings and all the groups, and etc. Do that stuff for you. The rendering of tables was a big issue. This was took quite some time to render tables with a large number of rows and columns. That performance has been enhanced tremendously on that part of the product. The capability to upload Excel data has now been enhanced to provide replace, update, and append options, and those are configurable at design time, so you can pick and choose which functionality is going to be available to the end user at runtime. A couple of new elements have been added to the table, so you can have cells that are text areas and combo boxes now. Support for nested tables, so you can have tables within tables. And then the concept of hidden row details. This is if you have a table, you can show, maybe there's 30 or 40 different columns in your table. What you can do is you can just show 3 or 4 or the applicable columns that you want that are most important, and then you can actually provide a more detailed look at each of those roles or each of those rows by specifying the additional column values, and I'll show you how that works as well. Some of the other additions and improvements, there's a new font and color selectors to make the product look a little bit more modern. A couple of new workflow properties, the auto launch and default approver email and body, which used to be server settings, now can be configured at the client within Composer. Process owner lane, Swimlane used to always get in the way, not used that often, so now you can actually delete it without messing up your workflow. When you have multiple views in a solution, it constantly prompts you to say, do you want to update all views for label changes? Well, now you can set that as a property so it will not prompt you anymore and just automatically do it for you to kind of get rid of that annoying dialogue. Translations, part of the translation feature, there was kind of a gap where you could not override the translations of static dropdowns, so you can do that now. Improved address element. The address element allows you to interface with the Google Places API, where it does a type ahead and it finds addresses for you and everything. So now what you can do is remove all of the address elements and build kind of your own look and feel of the results that come back from that address lookup. And last is the isVisible group property. This is a property on groups that allow you to not render the group when you first load the form to help improve performance. And now what you can do is, before it was all or nothing, now you can actually save, just show the group header, so you know that group is there, but it's just not rendered. So it gives a little bit more flexibility. So those are kind of the things that were added. I'm going to go over several of them, and again, this portion is just to give you a little bit more detail on each one of these, where you can find this information within Composer while you're using it. And we'll just go through each one of these, and then, like I said, we'll do a little demonstration at the end. So data connections are located in the Solutions tab, and there's a new icon in the upper right that will bring up a dialog that looks very, very similar to a data connection dialog as you use it today, where you can specify SharePoint lists or OWC connections or SharePoint or SQL Server, etc. But there's a new setting at the top that says, okay, now create this, and you can store it up in a library. And these libraries you can put a scope on. So depending on who you want to have access to this data connection, you can do it by SharePoint site, collection, and farm. And what those do is they allow you to say, okay, this data connection is only available to those people who are publishing solutions on this specific site, or on this specific site collection, which is a site and all subsites, or for any site within SharePoint. It's very, very handy for, you know, if you have any kind of data connections that are reused across solutions. This is a nice way to go. This is just a little look at the new condition builder. When you're building rules, anytime you select the condition link, it's going to bring up this nice little GUI now, to where you can now group conditions, group attributes. It's all of the same selections that you had before, but now you can actually turn it into more complex conditions. Field instructions. Again, this is more of a similar to a tooltip. And there's a couple of places where you can configure this. One is from the properties dialog, when you select that from the form data tab, and then you can also get to it from the context menu in the form data tab, right clicking on any of the fields. And there's a little edit instructions button. What that'll bring up is this rich text editor, and allow you to build any kind of, you know, instructions or step-by-step or any kind of nice looking information that that gets brought up as you hover over that field. So you can see in the bottom image there. This is the rules inspector. This is actually a pretty nice feature to kind of give you an overview of all the different rules that are being used, and you can navigate to the different fields and the different rules directly from this interface. But a lot of these solutions get really full of rules, hundreds of rules, and so this helps you kind of find what you're looking for, and we've added a search box at the top so you can now search for specific rule names, get you right to that rule, and you can also print it to PDF or whatever for documentation purposes, or if you just want to have a reference sitting next to you while you're developing the solution. This is the group within group. So under the container elements where you find repeating groups and selectable tables and stuff, you'll now find a new entry called new subgroup. And if you look at the image, let me see if I can get my pointer working here. You have a parent group up top. You can put a subgroup here, another subgroup within the parent group, and then you can have even subgroups if you want. And all of these act independently of each other. So any of the rules that apply to a group where you want to collapse or expand or hide or make read-only, all those rules apply to the same, just like they would before, but they would apply just to that subgroup if that's what you're selecting. It just gives you a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you can lay out your form as well. The one caveat is it may cause some issues with the responsive layout. So if you're looking at it on a cell phone or on a tablet or something like that, this may cause some issues with the way the form gets rendered. A couple of new rule options and actions. There's always been the run rule on form load, which will execute that rule when the form gets loaded. Two new ones have been added: halt execution and disable. The halt execution is more of a kind of a programmer's or debugging feature. If you've ever used the browser debugger, the F12 on Chrome, it brings up the little debugging tools or development tools. If that's open and you have this halt execution checked, what'll happen is that when you execute this rule, it automatically stops the debugger for you, so you can then interrogate that rule and see what's happening if you have any issues with it. The disable rule is just that. If you click that, it's just not going to execute the rule. This is kind of handy. A lot of times you'll put in rules just to test things, and you don't want to have, or you want to disable a rule so to see if another rule is being executed, etc. And this way you don't have to delete it and then re-add it. And a couple of new rule actions. Execute rules for a field. This can be handy so you don't have to duplicate rule code or duplicate rules on different fields. So if you can define the rule on a single field, and then for another field you can say, hey, I want to execute the rules on this other field, so you don't have to copy those rules from field to field. And then set a label. You can now change the label of an element, either the label, the sub-label, or if you have a button, you can change the button label, or there's a label element you can change. So all of these are now, you can actually change these as rules, so you can do them at runtime based on some condition. Sometimes very handy to change the actual label of a button, depending on what fields are set and that type of stuff. The configurable Excel upload options, again, we have replace, update, and append. Within Composer at design time, you can specify exactly which ones you want to be available to the end user at runtime. So whatever you select will be, it's a radio button at runtime, and the ones that you do not select will be disabled, and the other ones will be available for selection. When you build a table, by default, they all come in as text boxes. There's a whole list of things you can change each of the cells to, and now we have text areas and combo boxes that you can turn a cell into. Then the update script. When you import scripts, either query or transaction scripts, into a solution, and then you decide you need to maybe add another field, or you need to modify that script in one way, in any way, you can now just right-click on that script, hit Update Script. It'll bring up that same import dialog, And when you import it, it's going to automatically know which fields were mapped, and it'll automatically handle that for you. Any new fields, it'll just create and do the appropriate thing. So prior to that, you kind of had to do that manually, so this is a nice little feature. Support for nested tables, so now you can have tables within tables. The only difference here is that when you do add a table, so if you select a table and you add another table, it's going to prompt you with 2 questions now instead of just 1. So the first question is how many columns you want in your table, which is the standard question you get for any table. And then the second question is how many columns do you want the table to span? So what it needs to know is how big or how long the table should be. So if we look at this table down here, this is the parent table with the AABB. The child table is the yellow, and so this would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns in it, and we're going to span 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 columns out of the parent. So that's how long it's going to be. Now when you first bring it in, if it doesn't look good, these properties are also available when you select on the table itself, so you can always change the parent column span at any time. If you wanted to expand all the way up to the LL, you would just change the parent's column span to 12. That type of thing. Along with that, we also have repeating groups within Composer, and you can actually have repeating tables within repeating groups as well. So this would be just kind of another representation of the data of a nested table or a nested repeating content. A couple new table properties. Row details, discussed that a little bit. So in this case, we have a table that may have, I don't know, 5 columns that you're actually putting into the table, and then behind the scenes you would configure all of these other columns and all of their values to be shown in a dialog box when you select a show details. So if you select on a specific row and you say show details, it's going to bring up a dialog box like this with all of these values for that specific row that are not actually shown within the table itself. So it just brings up additional detail for each of those rows. Enforce row count on Excel upload. This is kind of a specific use case, but what this says is if you have a table with 10 rows in it and then you export that content to Excel and you type in and you want to make all your changes Excel and then you want to upload that content back into your table, it's going to restrict you to only upload those 10 rows. So you won't be able to upload 9 rows or upload 11 rows. It's going to restrict you and force you to only upload the number of rows that are currently existing in that table, so you're not making row change modifications. Hopefully that made sense. And then this is just kind of fly through here and some of the other enhancements. You'll see the improved font and color pickers. Some of these new workflow properties, if you're familiar with some of these, they used to be only available to you at the server level and under the server configurations, but now you can get them directly from within the workflow. I won't go over exactly what they're doing here, or the functionality of these. And a little side note is all of this stuff it's taken directly out of the release notes on the Winshuttle support page. So if you have any questions on any of the functionality in terms of what these properties do, you should be able to find all that information on the Winshuttle help. Process owner, Swimlane, you can now delete it. Pretty straightforward. This is the auto propagate changes, so you don't get bugged with all of these prompts. Do you want to update every view? Do you want to update every view? You can just set this to true and it won't ask you anymore for that specific field. So it's on a field by field basis or a label by label basis. Within a drop-down, now if you have static or manually entered options, there's a new little column here with the ... box that allows you to override any translations for any of these values. For translating data that's coming from like a SharePoint list or from a SQL server, there is a way to do that as well. And here's a URL to help teach you how to do that. Talked a little bit about the new address element. This autocomplete at the top here is what's interfaces with the Google Places API. So if you start typing in stuff, it'll automatically, find your location and give you addresses that it finds. Prior to this, you had to keep the existing address fields that were part of the element. Now you can get rid of all of those, and you can bring in and make your address fields look whatever you want it to look like, and restrict certain fields that you want to show. And the isVisible group property. Again, this is used if you have performance issues. If you have groups within your form that may or may not be used and you just hide them when the forms load, this will actually not even render them, which will make the performance loading the group a lot quicker. But the new option now is you can actually just show the header of the group. Before it was all or nothing. That helps sometimes. Okay, so that's kind of going through each one of those guys and showing you where that is. What we have here, I guess I better open my solution. I created a little solution that will kind of show you how some of this stuff works. Should have had this done beforehand, but okay, so we're in Composer here, and I'll just go through some of these options that we just looked at. If you go to, we'll do the data connections. If you go to the solution tabs and hit data connections, it's going to bring you up this dialog. If I want to create a new data connection, put in a library, I can hit create, and again, they're going to get very similar to what you already have, except it now has a scoping to where you want to store that and who you want to give availability to it. I already have a couple out here, so if I wanted to add a customer listing to my solution, I can just add it to my solution, it adds it, and we're done. So it's a nice feature, and here's where it added it to my data connections. And I don't have to go in and find the SharePoint list, determine what columns, put in the authentication, all that stuff is done for you. The condition builder, if you look at any one of these fields, I made kind of a little, not too complex, but what this is doing is this is saying that if the cost is greater than 99 and the material equals 100, 100, or 100, 300, and the plant is equal to 1,000 or 3,000, then execute this rule. So these are the kinds of things you can now do using a nice graphical interface. You can add different conditions, you can add multiple groups, multiple conditions within groups, etc. And it just gives you a lot more flexibility. Disable rule and set breakpoint. So if I look at any one of these rules, I now have these three options. I won't go into them, but this is where they're located in the UI. The new set label action. So if we'll go back to the rules on this cost, what I'm doing here is on form load, I'm setting this rule result, this XXX, and this YYY to no match, please try again. If this is satisfied, then I'm going to say there is a match and I found it, etc. It's going to change these labels actually back to what they were. And I'll show you how that looks at runtime. The field instructions, I also have if I come in here and I look at the field properties of this field, there's an edit instructions. It's going to bring up this nice little text editor, rich text editor. I can put in links, I can change fonts, colors, all that fun stuff, just to make it look a little bit nicer. This is pretty ugly, but that's besides the point. So what's going to happen now when I'm at runtime, if I hover over the cost field, it's going to bring up this nice looking instructions. Groups within groups. Here I have a parent group. Here's a subgroup, another subgroup. Again, they kind of work independently of each other. It's just to help with the layout. So if I want to collapse any one of these independently, if I want to collapse them all, I can just collapse the parent group. So again, it just kind of helps with the layouts and making your form look a little nicer. And then the rules inspector, the export. So if I come up here onto my fields, I right click the rules inspector. This gives me a list of all the rules that I currently have within my solution. If I want to print it, it'll give me a nice little print view. I can either print it or save it. And then there's also a search. So if I want to look for, something to do with customers, there it is right here. I got a customer ID and a customer. So if you have lots of rules, this is very handy. So real quick, let's see what that looks like at runtime. So we'll open up one of these guys. Data connection, condition builder, that's all design time. The set label. So if I pick, what do I say, 1,000 or 100, 100 and plant 1,000. If there's my tooltip or my instruction. If I make this over 100, you'll see now that we can actually update these labels on the fly, which is sometimes real handy. If I make it less than 100, it puts it back to the original stuff. Again, parent groups, you can hide things independently at runtime. If you want different colors, different, some read-only, some not. Again, all of those rules will apply to the individual subgroups just like they would a parent group. The rules inspector was actually also the client-side stuff. So we'll kind of go back here and look at some other stuff. So rendering performance, I'll show you what that looks like at runtime when we upload some data. You'll see the feedback that gets, one, you'll see how fast it is. Two, you'll see the feedback is a little bit nicer to show you what's going on. The Excel upload options on what's available to you. So if this looks like it has it here. Go to the properties. Right now we only have replace, but if I could put append or update, etc., and that's what's going to be available at runtime. The hidden table rules, so hidden table details, row details. So if you look at this table right here, it has all of these fields in it. So when I load the employees, it's going to update all of these fields, but I'm only showing several of them. So if I go back to the properties, I can go in here and say, okay, when they select on that row, I want to show them all of this other information, the birth date, the hire date, the notes, etc. And you can just add as many as you want, right? It's going to show you all the different fields that are available to you. And I'll show you what that looks like at runtime too. And then text area and combo box. So here's a text area in your table. Here's a combo box in your table. And then nested tables. So got a couple of things going on down here. So here's your main table that has, for instance, the material number, description, etc. Maybe there's multiple plants for each one of those and you have multiple materials. So what you could do is create a nested table, and you would be able to add multiple plants for this material, and you would be able to add a new material which would bring in another set of plants for that specific material. And again, I'll show you how that works at runtime. One of the key things about nested tables and nested tables within repeating groups, the structure on the back end is exactly the same. So you have a repeating content and you have a nested repeating content. So when you have this structure, you can represent it either with nested repeating tables, so a table within a table. You could have it represented with a repeating group within a nested repeating table, or you could have it with a repeating group within a repeating group. All of those are just representations of what you want the data to look like. But the underlying structure is exactly the same. I hope that makes sense. So with that said, let's take a look at some of this stuff at runtime. So first thing we'll do is we'll load some orders here. And the majority of the time it's taking right now is actually going back to SharePoint and finding the data. But here's the feedback that you're getting. So when you do load this data, it has to go through. That just loaded 830 rows of data, and it validated every single one of the cells. So 8,000 plus, 8,300 plus cells are now actually 3,500 cells or something like that. But it gave you feedback, and sometimes if you have really large tables, it'll just sit there. But this actually now tells you that it's doing something. You also see that as you go through the different pages, the performance is much better than in the past. If I want to show 100 rows, that just showed 100 rows. And again, this is a large improvement from previous versions. If I want to upload Excel data, you'll notice now that I only have replaced. The other two are disabled. And then searching is also just a lot quicker. And it'll tell you that it's searching and that type of stuff. Another thing that was a little, let's start this back to 10 rows. If I delete a row, it has to go through and it has to validate and run all the rules on every single cell. So again, here's some of that feedback that it's given you, telling you what it's doing before and make it a little bit nicer experience. If I load the employees, this will give you a list of all the employees, hopefully. There they are. And we're only showing a handful of the properties for each employee. So now if I go over here and I right click, I'm going to see it say show details. If I show details, now I'm getting more information for this specific employee. So Janet, you have her birth date, her hire date, some stuff about her that you didn't want to put in the original table, but you do still want to have access to it some way at runtime. This also helps improve rendering as well, because you're not rendering all that information within the form. And then last but not least is the nested tables. So as you can see here, if I put, I can have a material, maybe a plant, I can put another plant within here. Now if I have another material, it's going to duplicate that. So now maybe this is 200 and this has plant 3, 4, and 5. So the idea here is that you can now have nested tables or nested repeating content for each of the parent data. The exact same data can be represented this way, right? So this is actually the repeating group, and you'll notice the difference. Up here you have one table header, and this red is associated to each one of these rows. So you don't have a table header on top of each one of these. The one thing you do have with the table though is you can collapse the child tables. So you can get this format and then you can expand as needed. But this would be the same thing as if I went in here and I said 100 here, 1. I had another one here, right? So it's the exact same structure. It's just being represented differently. And you'll see the material number, material type, those are all replicated on each row. So this is a repeating group with a nested table. And then the third option, which isn't shown here, you could theoretically have a repeating group within a repeating group. So this table right here would actually be another repeating group. And I'll emphasize again, in the back end, the form data and the schema of this content that you're putting into these tables and groups is exactly the same. It's just a different representation. This way, though, you don't have the ability to collapse and expand the different groups. So that pretty much covers what I wanted to talk about. There are a lot of other features that have been added to the product, and a lot of features that that are in there that I have not covered. And again, if you go to the release notes on the Winshuttle website, it'll give you all the information on what's been added to the product, as well as their documentation. All of this stuff should be documented as well on the Winshuttle website. So Tara, you want to take over with questions, or?
Yeah, thank you so much, Gary. That was great. Does anybody have any questions? It doesn't look like it.
That exciting, I guess.
Very
right?
thorough. Oh, wait, Natalie has a question. Can you type it in the chat window? Natalie, did you have a question you wanted to ask?
Hi, yes, I'm having a little trouble with my computer at the moment. Do the field instructions translate when you go and invoke translate on Composer?
They do not. Nope. Unfortunately, that's not part of the translation feature.
Thanks.
If no one else has any questions, you can click on ahead to the next slide, Gary.
All right. That work for you?
It works. So we have some upcoming events, Utopia sessions and WUGs. The big annual conference for WUG is in Atlanta this year, and it's on Monday and Tuesday, September 18th and 19th. You can register for that on the Winshuttle website. And then there's also going to be a WUG and a Lean Utopia after party on October 26th. And it's going to be a really great event, and it's at the Urbasi Winery down near Canton. Which is a really fun place if you've never been there. You can register for that on our website or also on the Winshuttle website as well. This is about solution care, and if your company doesn't currently have it, you can try it out for 5 hours free. Just email solutioncare@clearprocesssolutions.com. This is a really great opportunity for your company. Just kind of speak with us, go through some demos, maybe think about what kind of solutions that we can help you with. And this is a little bit about Clear Process Solutions. We are the 2015 and 2016 Winshuttle Partner of the Year. We're also moving a little bit into process BI dashboards, so we can help you with that as well. Thank you all so much for joining us today. And Gary, you did a great job. This will be on our YouTube channel after about 12:30 today. We'll have that posted. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you.